Atkins has requested to go first. All other authors will begin afterwards. You may begin. I think Mr. Portantino will understand. And we'll start as a subcommittee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I already thanked my colleague for letting me go ahead. I appreciate it very much, and I'm pleased to be here today to present SB 519. It's a bill that will bring additional transparency and accountability to our county jails, specifically around in-custody deaths. I'd like to start off by saying I'm pleased to accept the technical amendments suggested by the committee, and certainly I want to thank the committee staff, your committee staff, and you, Mr. Chairman, for this work. In 2020, there were over 150 in-custody deaths statewide, and while SB 519 is intended to provide oversight for the whole state, I come at this issue from a local perspective. Over a 15-year span, 185 people died in San Diego jails, the highest rate of in-custody deaths in the state. In 2021 alone, there were 18 deaths in San Diego's jails. In 2021, members of the San Diego legislative delegation called on the state auditor to review the alarming and troubling deaths occurring in custody in San Diego. Last year, the state auditor released its report providing a series of recommendations, primarily at the local level, to prevent future deaths. While many recommendations have been implemented at the local level, and I would thank Sheriff Martinez for that, there are still lingering questions about how we can bring more transparency and accountability to prevent any further deaths. And many local jurisdictions across the state are actually grappling with similar problems. In 2022, 18 people died in custody in Riverside County Jail. In 2023, 7 people have died in Los Angeles County Jail so far. There are at least, and this was really shocking to me, at least 10 counties that are in federal consent decrees right now. Most involve the delivery of health care to people in custody. But local governments have limited control over the policies and procedures adopted by a sheriff's department, even though a county board of supervisors is required to approve a sheriff department's budget. And interestingly, county boards of supervisors bear the responsibility of settling lawsuits involving in-custody jail deaths, but have limited authority in requiring the Sheriff's Department to enact policies to reduce in-custody deaths. For example, San Diego County jails and deaths in those jails and injuries have cost San Diego taxpayers almost $50 million in legal settlements and jury awards in just the past 5 years. So SB 519 is intended to provide local governments and the public important information in order to help address these issues at the local level. Specifically, SB 519 does the following. It ensures that full reports of investigations relating to in-custody deaths are publicly accessible. This is consistent with the auditor's report. It would expand the mission of BSCC to promote the legal and safe conditions for youth, inmates, and staff in local detention facilities. Now, originally the bill would also have reauthorized local board of supervisors to create a local Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation to run a jail. However, in conversations and as a sign of good faith in those conversations with law enforcement stakeholders, this provision was removed and substituted with an alternative accountability measure. Specifically, it creates a statewide local detention monitor within the Board of State and Corrections to review in-custody deaths and the delivery of health and mental health care. This monitor is modeled after the Office of the Inspector General, who would issue recommendations to both the state and local detention facility to help address the problems with its county detention facilities. So I'm going to continue to work, obviously, with opposition on this alternative accountability provision to address their concerns. Mr. Chair, colleagues, with me today to testify in support of the bill, with your permission, is Paul Parker, Executive Officer at the San Diego County Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board, we call them CLERB, and Yusuf Miller, who is with the North County Equity and Justice Coalition.
You both have a total of 5 minutes. You split it up any way you want, whenever you're ready to begin. Or all three of you have three, or whatever.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Mr. Chair. Again, my name is Paul Parker. I'm the Executive Officer with the San Diego County Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board. We're a civilian oversight entity over the San Diego County Sheriff's Department. We conduct independent investigations into all detention facility-related deaths. In 2021, there were 18 deaths. In 2022, there were 19 or 20, depending upon whose statistics you cite. And so far this year, there have been 9. Unfortunately, CLRB, family members, community members, and media representatives are not privy to internal affairs or administrative review records. This lack of transparency, combined with statutory and case law limitations placed upon California civilian oversight entities, prohibit public discussion of these investigations and leave family members in the community without answers to the most basic of questions. What preventative measures were undertaken? What did the department do well? What could it have done better? Was the death preventable? Was anyone responsible for it? What were they held accountable? What policy changes were implemented? As a former medical examiner, coroner executive, I've interacted with thousands of grieving family members during the past few decades and know that they are provided minimal, if any, relevant information during and after the investigation into a law enforcement-related death, which can last several months to a few years. I know all too well that when a family member is not told details about a death, they will fill in the blanks for themselves, obviously with speculation and conjecture, thus coming to oftentimes incorrect conclusions. Many times, litigation is the only option available for families to learn all the circumstances surrounding the death of their loved ones. Persons in custody, in county custody, are certainly vulnerable. They are relying upon the county for their care and well-being. Creating a local detention facility monitor within the BSCC will have zero fiscal impact to a county, while permitting a local entity, the Board of Supervisors, by resolution, to exert a level of control by calling for an audit or review of policies, practices, and procedures. The creation of this detention facility monitor will also result in additional oversight relating to in-custody deaths and delivery of medical and mental health care. Creating this monitor through the BSCC will result in more control at the local level, a quicker response to detention facility issues or concerns, and most importantly, the saving of lives. CLRB supports Senator Atkins' efforts to increase transparency around detention facility-related deaths and better management of detention facilities. SB 519 may not prevent all deaths or relieve the pain that families experience in the event of a death, but will certainly help solve the mysteries left unanswered and the stories left untold by the status quo. And with that, I defer to Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, staff. My name is Yusef Miller. I'm with the North County Equity and Justice Coalition, the Saving Lives in Custody campaign of 2020. We support, as a campaign, SB 519, and not only us, the families who are directly impacted by this bill and by in-custody deaths support this bill in San Diego County. These families have been monitoring and watching this bill and its advancement as it's been developing, and they know that it impacts their loved ones. The transparency portion of this bill is so critical because not knowing is an insult to injury. They've already lost their loved ones, and sometimes for more than a year, they don't have the facts on how their loved one was lost. They don't have any facts on toxicology or manner of death. All they have is ideas in space where they can fill in the blanks, as Mr. Parker said. This transparency is crucial and something that should not be negotiated on. It should be apparent that whatever can be transparent and open to the public should be, for the public good, for the sanity of these families, and for humanity's sake. Accountability is also an issue that transparency exposes. Transparency exposes systematic and programmatic failures in any system. So we can reach out and root out whether it's a bad policy or a bad actor. We have to admit that we have bad actors. In the case of Elisa Serna, a doctor and a nurse are now being charged for involuntary manslaughter for the neglect to death of Elisa Serna. And we have other cases like this, we believe, in San Diego County, the highest in-custody death rate in the state last year. We're also supported by other counties in the state of California. Riverside County, those families have come together looking for support and transparency and accountability. LA County has joined us in this quest for transparency. Sacramento and San Francisco, all families coming together for this fight. And when we have an entity that takes over because of any neglect from the Sheriff's Department, we would ask, as the families, we would ask that that person or entity, they specialize in decarceration, a method of alternatives to incarceration, to drop our footprint of incarceration. Okay.
Go ahead, finish. Your 5 minutes are up. Finish.
Okay, to manage incarceration with that focus, decarceration for not only our adults but also our youth detention centers. We've had loss of life in youth detention centers in San Diego and most recently in LA, which caused the closing of 2 youth detention centers. We respectfully ask for you to pass this vote.
Thank you very much. Any witnesses in support, name and organization only?
Natasha Minsker, Smart Justice California, in strong support.
Good morning. Margot George on behalf of the California Public Defenders Association in support. Thank you.
Good morning, Adriana Sanchez Ochoa with Next Gen California on behalf of Next Gen California and immigrant defense advocates in strong support.
Thank you. Are there any witnesses in opposition? Oh, could you make some room for Mr. Salcilla?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members.
Good morning.
Corey Salzillo on behalf of the California State Sheriff's Association, regrettably but respectfully in opposition to SB 519. We appreciate the recent amendments to address the governance issue in terms of moving the jails out from under the control of the sheriff. That said, we're concerned about this duplicative additional layer of oversight that the creation of this independent detention monitor portends. Just as we've discussed before in this committee, county jails and sheriffs are currently overseen by the Board of State Community Corrections, state DOJ, federal DOJ, state courts, federal courts, district attorneys, county grand juries, voters, to name a few. We also understand and share the desire to reduce deaths in custody. But this bill conditions the additional reviews on the request of the governor, the legislature, or boards of supervisors. We're concerned that this construct will fall victim to political whim, resulting in invasive and burdensome investigations. The bill grants significant and largely unfettered access to records and staff, which creates workload and resource challenges for county agencies. There have to be considerations about things like attorney-client privilege when it comes to cases that are going to be litigated, because the reality is cases involving deaths are often litigated, and there has to be some consideration of that notion. And I think we're making progress and working on the records portion of the bill. But the detention monitor is very much concerning. And on the notion of the monitor, lastly, I'll say the ability of the monitor to require employees to be interviewed creates substantial concerns relative to employee labor and due process protections, which I'll leave to my colleague. But for those reasons, we respectfully ask for your no vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good morning, committee members. I'm David Mistagni. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today on behalf of PORAC. I'd like to thank the Pro Tem for working with us on this bill. We appreciate the amendments that have been made to date, but most oppose the bill as currently written. PORAC doesn't oppose the establishment of a local detention oversight entity with the authority to review in-custody deaths, investigations, issue reports, and recommendations for improvements. Our concern is that the authority granted the oversight entity in this bill violates core labor and constitutional rights of employees. First, the bill expressly provides for the impairment of existing labor contracts. Secondly, the bill purports to grant the monitor the power to compel local employees to submit to interrogations without proper legal authority. The power to compel an employee to provide a statement is derived from the employment relationship and the threat of discipline up to termination for failure to cooperate. For example, Post, in its licensing statute, derives similar powers from the threat of license revocation for non-cooperation. The monitor has no employment relationship or licensing authority, and thus no power to compel local employees to provide testimony. Thirdly, the bill violates employees' rights against self-incrimination under the Fifth Amendment because these investigations and questionings often involve potentially incriminating questions. Our Supreme Court in Leibarger carefully balanced public employee Fifth Amendment rights against the need for public employers to know about potential misconduct, in holding that an employer can compel testimony from an employee, and that's the key, so long as there's a grant of immunity. The monitor doesn't have that power. In Spellbauer, our Supreme Court affirmed Liebarger and expressly held that public entities have no power to force public employees to waive their Fifth Amendment rights as a condition of continued employment. For example, in the post-licensing bill, it expressly provides for recognition and accommodation of the exercise of these constitutional rights. In closing, PORAC looks forward to continuing to work with the Pro Tem and her staff to address these concerns and improve this bill.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in opposition? Name and organization.
Good morning, Lieutenant Julio De Leon from the Riverside County Sheriff's Office on behalf of Chad Bianco, Sheriff of Riverside County, in opposition. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in opposition? We'll bring it back to committee for questions, comments. Oh, we don't have a quorum yet. We can't move the bill yet. Did you want to close and maybe
Thank you.
answer some of the statements that
Yes.
were brought up?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I would make 2 points very quickly, understanding you have a huge agenda today. The public disclosure piece of the bill, there's 2 pieces: the transparency on the information provided to families, and then the comment about workers' rights being unconstitutional. The public disclosure piece of the bill builds upon transparency of former bills run by Senator Skinner, SB 1421 and SB 16, relating to officer-involved shootings. So this bill matches that identical framework and applies it to in-custody jail deaths. This is the piece that if there is privileged attorney work product, we clarify that courts may use in-camera review to determine what is protected and what isn't. To the second piece, I would also say the statewide monitor in the bill I mentioned in my comments is modeled after a statutory framework of the Office of Inspector General, which oversees CDCR. Correctional officers are protected under POBAR, and we haven't heard that OIG violates the rights of those correctional officers. So this is modeled after existing frameworks. But of course, we will look at this. We'll continue to have conversations. We still are moving through a process. But just to respond to those comments. And I would, at the appropriate time, respectfully ask for your support, and again, with my thanks to the committee for working with us.
Thank you, and I thank you for bringing this. It's very important, I think, on both sides. Transparency and finding out what's going on in the jails and why people are expiring while they're in custody is, I think, both sides really do want to find out what's going on and ultimately stop it. So when the appropriate time, we'll bring it up and take a vote.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Now, Mr.